with no standing.
Good evening and welcome to week 4 of the European Sprint Series 2023 Season 1. This week coming to you from Le Mans. And this week you've got me, Chris Rowlands, on commentary, and in the broadcasting booth we've got Sean Cranley-Swash as always, and I am joined by Michael Paul. So we will get going with the race in just a bit. We are just waiting for the cars to grid. Mercifully, we have not got a full pace lap here, so we can get straight into the action. Should be able to see on the screen now we've just finished qualifying, and these are our LMDh results. We've got Eduardo Leo on pole. He's done a 3-minute 18.24. Pedro Albert in second. Car number 1 only half a tenth behind on the front row alongside him. Third place we've got Robbie Foley, less than a second behind as well, and alongside him Benjamin Frigiero. Marco Ricci and Dennis Wolf are on the third row, and you can see we've got a 16-strong grid in the LMDh field today. I think that's probably our biggest grid since week 1. Let's have a look at LMP2 as well. So you've got Adam State on pole with a 3:30.7. Chris McGrath in second, just under 2 tenths behind him. Then Charlotte Morelli in third, alongside them Ollie Cole, and then on the third row Adrian Azcarate and Max Kuss. Quite a close infield in the LMP2, which is 12 strong today. And then a quick look at the GTE grid. The top two could not be separated by much less. Tobias Ogrodnik has put it on pole. Michael Rack alongside him. They have both done a 3:45 flat. Doran Kolosiec is in third. He is just over half second behind, and then a bit of a bigger gap back to Christian Streitenberger, then Konrad Dukodriek and Marco Mendes. And you can see in all three classes quite a few drivers not able to set a time. I suspect that's down to just how long this track is. And you can see in the background we've already had an incident, and that's not ideal to see. In the back there, I think that's Giuseppe Guarino, and I think Lockie Brown may have also been victimised by that. But yeah, let's bring in Michael and have a quick chat with Michael before we get going. How are you looking forward to this night race at Le Mans?
Good evening, Chris. Welcome for me again. Yes, I'm excited at Le Mans. I've been racing it this week a lot myself. I wouldn't say I've had terrible luck at all. It's been really bad, but I'll be excited to see a top split race at Le Mans in the dark. If Charlotte Morelli pulls off the same performance I saw at Spa, it will be fantastic to see her racing at the night in Le Mans.
I think that's definitely the case. We've got a lot of very, very strong drivers in this field. If we discount the crash we've already seen in the LMDh formation line, we're just approaching the Ford chicanes in a few seconds, and then we can get going. This is, of course, quite a tricky start, in particular for the two slower classes, because they will have had the green flag before they reach the Ford chicanes. Eduardo Leo and Pedro Sanchez Albert, however, are going to have a nice clean run, assuming we don't go before we hit the Ford chicanes. We're just about to hit that moment as well. And don't forget, these drivers are going to have cold tyres, especially if it's a bit cooler, because it is the night time. As we just come through the last of the two chicanes, and Albert is on his way, and we've got a driver off in the background. That's Robbie Foley. I think the pressure's got to him a little bit there. Is he going to rejoin safely? But Leo and Albert, they have set off, and no other positions have changed so far. I think Brabner has got past Guarino, but and a big twitch from Eduardo Leo there. Is Albert going to be able to take advantage as we come through into the Dunlop chicanes? Maybe worth holding off until we get past Tetra Rouge and onto the Mulsanne straight, but he is about as close as you can be as we have a look at the LMP2 field. Adam State has got through okay. I think Pedro Gomez has headed into the pits from LMDh class. Max Kuss has made it up a couple of places already. As you can see, Pedro Gomez there. Something's obviously happened to him, and that's at number 38. That's Tanguy Bion losing it on the cold tyres, and Pedro Gomez's race is about as eventful as you could possibly have one so far. Michael Rack in the GTE has managed to get past Ogrodnik, who is down 4 places into 5th, so something's happened to Ogrodnik as well. This has been quite an untidy start so far, and that's Tanguy Bion going again, but I think we saw him on the cold tyres just lose it there, and you can see Oh, that's a lovely shot there. As you can see, all of the drivers coming along the Malsan straight. Eduardo Leo still in the lead. It does look like we've had a bit of a tangling together in LMDH as well, because Patrick Svalassi is down a few places as well. Guarino, I think perhaps with a bit of damage from losing it on the pace lap, has dropped a few places, but that means everyone from 8th downwards has made a few places. In 8th place at the moment, Jan Curbs is someone I'd be interested to see how he does, because in the former LMP1 class, he absolutely dominated at times round here, and you can see we are with him now, the car number 20. At the moment, having to hold off Andrew Dawson, car number 5, just behind him. You can see on the track map, we are coming into Mulsanne, so one of the heavier braking points on the circuit, not necessarily somewhere you'd want to make a move because you want that good exit coming out towards Indianapolis and Arnage. And Michael, I mean, it's been quite a messy start so far, but it does look like we're going to have some decent battles, at least in the LMDH field.
Yeah, certainly it's been a bit of a crazy start, especially in cold tyres. That's one thing I have found tricky going into the first couple of corners. Cold tyres, cold brakes, you're going to lose the rear of the LMP especially. I've never drove the LMDH at Le Mans just yet. Scared to, I must admit, Chris. But yeah, hopefully it'll settle down a bit. We have got an hour race, as we all know. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
We have seen in the first 3 weeks, as you say, quite a few of the LMDH drivers just losing the rear of the car with some snap oversteer instability as they're heavy on the brakes. But Curbs and Dawson, they're both able to get the car slowed down without incident as they were trying to go too wide into Indianapolis. And it does look like we're going to have some interesting fights, and it's close in the LMP2 field as well. I think as Karate's just managed to get past Max Kuss as well, but there's a big battle brewing both for the lead, and you can see in the background there nearly 4 cars going into the same space here. We're with Julius Braun on the inside here in car number 42, very close to contact with 3 different cars there. That's Kuss and Azkarate just in front, Ollie Cole just behind. As we come through, I think we're round to the Porsche curves here. Yes, we are. And I think we're seeing just how strong the drivers are in this top split. Let's not jinx it too much, but I think lesser drivers could well have had an incident here. So we're going too wide behind. I think that's Pedro Gomez getting past Elliot Hellier as he makes his way back through the grid. But this is an awkward space for them. I mean, there's not a huge pace disparity between the two classes. And we're going to see this a bit later on where you're not going to see anywhere near as much of a intermingling of the 3 classes, because this is an over 3-minute lap. It's very much a sprint race rather than a multi-class race in some senses. So I think today we're probably going to see the drivers better at raw pace and perhaps not better at managing traffic, do better than you would normally expect. But we were just with, we'll go to Marco Ricci now, again another former ESS stalwart in the LMP1, moving over to the LMDH. He's got Andrew McKinley for company right behind him in the car number 30. Richie in car number 16 here, as we are just dealing with the first of the 2 chicanes on the Mulsanne straight. And we'll have to see here, we saw it at Monza last week as well, Michael, how strategy is going to play into this in terms of fuel saving with all the long straights. Do you think that's going to factor in much?
Yeah, certainly. The races that I've done this week, I've definitely taken a different strategy. Every race I've done, to try and gain as much time as possible, but also to try and do an undercut at Le Mans with it being such a big lap. However, different drivers, my racing style is very different to a lot of these people in the class. But going to the replay quicker, we can see Jan Corbs there losing that into the first corner. I'm on the Michelin straight, and luckily just keeps it out of the wall. Hopefully he doesn't lose too many places and gets back on track.
I think he is now running in 14th, but you could just see that car get very unsettled as it went over the curb. So that's something to be mindful of for our prototype drivers this evening, because they will be looking to gain every 10th of a second they can. And for the first time in what feels like a few weeks, we've got a pretty intense battle for the lead in LMDH with Eduardo Leo and Pedro Albert. Basically, again, within a 10th of a second of each other as we come through into Indianapolis. Just look how close those 2 cars are getting together, but also look at the gap they've managed to build over the rest of the field. I mean, you've got Benjamin Frigerio in 3rd, just over 2 seconds behind, but the gap back to Marco Ricci in 4th is now over 4 seconds. So they're going to have to, I think it would be good for them if they could perhaps cooperate at this early stage, because of course we've still got just under 55 minutes to go. This is a long race. And it's not just LMDH we got a battle for. Adam State and Chris McGrath, who were our first and second on the grid, have remained so. They've not quite managed to build the gap with Charlotte Morelli, as you pointed out earlier, having already had a strong performance, Michael, back at Spa. We've actually, it looks like, now got a three-way battle for the LMP2 lead, with Pedro Gomez in the LMDH just behind them, just to make this even more interesting. So as much as I was saying, oh, and actually, yeah, so we look here, a battle for the lead in GTE as well. We're absolutely spoiled here, and I think perhaps that is an element, as you say, Michael, of because it's such a drafty track, you're going to end up with these trains building almost. But it's a long race still to go yet, and I wonder if, for say, Kolosiec, for example, maybe it's worth him just saving that fuel, as you mentioned, behind Michael Rack, who, this is car number 2 and car number 3. They're both high-quality drivers. It's not like if Kolosiec gets past, he's going to streak away into the distance based on the pace we've seen historically from Rack. It's also nice to see in the GTEs, we've got 3 different manufacturers in the top 3, which is, again, it's not a very common thing. Sadly, no Fords in the GTE field today, but it's nice to see a BMW rear its, if I'm going to be controversial, rear its ugly head. But Christian Streitenberg has done quite well. He's up to 3rd from 4th, and Pedro Gomez has now headed into the pits from the LMDH, so hopefully that won't have interfered too much with the battle for the lead. But here again is another of the look how many LMDHs we've still got battling out. It's what we love to see, Michael, isn't it? It's got all these battles all throughout the field, and so far it seems like everyone's managed to behave, don't you think?
Yes, strange accident at the start. We would love to see an actual replay of that if possible, and to actually see what actually happened before they even got the green flag. But it's nice to see all these LMDHs battling so close and even going down the categories as well. And as you rightly say, a lot of close battles in all categories. It will be a close race to the end.
I mean, if I just think back to last week at Monza, about 10 minutes in, looking on our timing screens, which is colour-coded based on how close, and you can see it on the timing tower as well, the redder it gets, the closer the cars are. There is a lot of red on that timing tower, and let's see, hopefully this is what happened to Giuseppe Guarino, this replay of him. I don't believe I'm seeing anything that's happened to him. This may well be from later on in the race, but we basically, this is what happens if you warm up your tyres. You're going to spin, sadly. And we can go back to the battle in LMDH for the lead. Albert and Leo have not been separated at all. Their fastest laps of the race so far, both set the last time around, was a 3-minute 20.09 for Albert, and as we go on board with Leo, his fastest time was just 0.05 of a second slower, a 3:20.14. Although that is with the benefit of the draft, so perhaps Albert has got a little bit of an edge on pace, but with Leo this close behind, he is not going to be able to shake him, and Leo is going to be able to save just a little bit of fuel. Although with how short the stops are for these cars, it might not cause too much of an advantage. But one thing that we can bank on is that this battle should hopefully go on for quite a while longer yet, because as you can see on the track map, there is still a lot of track to go before they catch up to any GTEs, and that is of course going to be true for the LMP2s as well, as they are just that smidgen slower so far. In fact, if you go by fastest lap so far, they're about 12 seconds a lap slower, as we see a battle further down in LMDH coming through the Ford chicanes at the end of the 3rd lap. Cannot believe we're already this far into the race. It's going very quickly, Michael, I'd say. And do you have any sort of particular favourites you expect from this battle? Anyone that's caught your eye that you think might be able to make a few moves here? Or is it a bit too early to say?
I don't know. It's going to be very close today, Chris. There's a lot of tight racing. I think with it being so early on, it'd be too close to call just now. But it'd be good to see some of those names that I'd seen back in Spa at the top. So hopefully Morelli, as long as she can keep up and keep that distance closed, she may end up on the top 3 and stay where she is. But if not, that's racing, unlucky. But as you say rightly with the LMP2s, they are a lot slower. And what I have found myself, it's a lot trickier to overtake the GTEs at Le Mans this year.
Yeah, of course, the LMP2s were slightly nerfed, to use gaming terminology, in what is a sim, not a game. I'm sure many people will be shouting at us if they were to hear me call this a game. So with the LMP2s just that little bit slower, it's brought them in to the range of the GTEs just a little bit more. And of course the LMDHs are substantially slower than the LMP1s were, and they don't have the same kind of boost system to absolutely hammer it on corner exit that made overtaking so much easier in that class. In fact, earlier in the day, Sean, our producer, did a bit of research for us, looking into the speeds into the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. The LMDHs are getting up to just over 320 kilometers an hour. LMP2s can get up to 320 kilometers an hour, so there is a bit of a difference. And then the GTEs, to be honest, not that far behind at just around 300 kilometers an hour. So as you're hurtling down a straight, that is not the kind of closing speed you would want if you are trying to deal with traffic. But we can see here Max Coos, who I think has been in all 4 races we've broadcast so far, and doesn't seem to ever have the luxury of having a particularly quiet race. He's got Ollie Cole for company behind him, and just in front Adrian Alzcarate, with Julius Braun behind Cole as well. So this is a 4-way battle at the moment. They are, I mean, to be honest, they're not too far behind the battle for the lead. So if those 3 at the front start holding each other up, these 4 here going from 4th to 7th could well catch up if they're willing to cooperate. And as you said, Michael, it doesn't look like at the moment any of these cars are particularly willing to make a move. And the same seems to be the case for McGrath, State and Morelli, although Adam State seems to have a bit of a straight line advantage because he is getting so close to McGrath as we finish on Mulsanne. And is he potentially going to make a move on this long straight? Because if we cast our minds back half a lap ago, Charlotte Morelli was far closer to Adam State than Adam State was to Chris McGrath, but it seems to be in this phase of the lap, State seems to have a bit of an advantage, although I say that all 3 of them are very, very close together. Are we going to see a move into Indianapolis here? We're going to have this awkward right-hander into the heavy braking zone for the left-hander. Look how close all 3 of them are getting. A little bit of a wiggle for Adam State under braking, and he has immediately pulled over to one side. That's for a second I thought defending, but he's going the opposite direction for if he was defending. Perhaps just taking a more severe line in so he can straighten out his braking line a bit closer. And another heavy train of battles here, and it actually looks like Hubert wants to try and make a move on George Brabner here. The car number 8 just poking his nose on the inside of the first corner, but well held off by George Brabner, but has that unsettled the car and taken it offline. The number 8 has managed to get alongside, but is going to be on the outside for the next braking zone. But he's got the move done, or has he got the move done before we get in there? He's left the space very wisely, but he's managed to get that car in front. Is he going to be able to hold it off as we come onto the Mulsanne straight? He has taken that chicane, right-hander very well indeed, it looks like. And now George Brabner is going to be under pressure from Dennis Wolf, Lockie Brown and Robbie Foley behind, who we saw have that off track on the first lap. So we'll be absolutely desperate to make some of those places up. So George Brabner under a lot of pressure now. And this seems to be allowing Martial Hubert to actually pull away a bit. That's some very high quality driving there. In fact, to be honest, this is high quality driving from all 5 here, because they are very close together and we don't seem to be having any problems with the following. And of course, let's not forget in GTE, Lee, our first and second in GTE, are still neck and neck as well. So we've got fights going on all throughout the field. This is our here we go. This is our GTE fight. I think Rack seems to be a bit stronger through the Porsche curves, because they were only about 0.2 of a second apart from each other before we came into this section. So that's something to look out for later on in the race. Perhaps Clossier's got the straight line advantage, but Rack seems to have the advantage in the corners, so that might make it a bit easier to defend his line as we get into the later stages, and the tyres perhaps give out on them a bit here. But this LMDH battle, 5 cars within pretty much a second and a half of each other. We've yet to see any of them do anything too silly. It does look like Dennis Wolf is the closest to making a move on George Brabner of anyone, but of course Lockie Brown behind, who actually started in 14th and, well, not quite last, 14th of 16 in the LMDH field, has done quite well to drag themselves up to 10th place, and with 7th well in sight. And Wolf, I think, just putting it up there, maybe just to cause a bit of a distraction. Look at, oh, and there's a bit of contact there, and Wolf's had to go wide. I think George Brabner can count themselves lucky there they didn't take any more damage or off track from that, because that could have been far worse. But Dennis Wolf has now been shuffled to the back of that train. He's actually lost the draft of it. But no let up there, because George Brabner now has Lockie Brown for company. So there's going to be another one there. But we are currently following the LMP2 battle. We've got a similar situation here, where the midfield of LMP2 has also got its own battle. We are now on board with Ollie Cole, who is in P6 at the back of this 3-car train. As Karate at the very front, but we can see Max Koos in front of us here. You can see the headlights of As Karate, and you can see Cole's not quite got the straight line advantage. So let's have a look at the battle in the same class for the lead. And actually, Chris McGrath has got past Adam State at some point in the last lap or so. But as we've correctly predicted, Michael, no one's been able to pull away, and if anything, it's actually dragging As Karate and Co back into it, because they were half a second quicker on the last lap. You can still see them in the background there. If you were in one of these battles right now, Michael, how would you be approaching it? Let's say if you were in third place right now, what would you be looking to do at this stage of the race?
If it was myself, I would happily stay in third for the time being. There's still over 40 minutes still to go in this race. My question and thinking logic would be how much closer a P4, 5 and 6 going to gain on me. But these are better drivers than I am, and I will admit, Chris. However, Charlotte Morelli, Andrew Stade and McGrath may take an early pit stop. We don't know. Or it may even be 4, 5 and 6 that take an early stop a lap early. But it's quite close, and as we said, there's been a lead change in the P2 category, and also in the LMDh. Pedro Albert and Eduardo Leo changed positions.
Yeah, and it
as
actually
well.
looks like, I wonder if something has actually happened to Eduardo Leo, because they were neck and neck, and now Leo is 2 seconds behind. He was only a lap slower last time out. We can potentially go to a replay here to see what happened. So they were fighting for position. Albert takes the outside line. I think we're at the end of the Mulsanne straight here, towards Indy actually, and got that move done. So has something happened to Leo perhaps after the fact? I mean, maybe Albert's just very, very quick. We're not giving him enough credit there. He is car number 1 after all, which means he's got the best iRating of anyone in the split. And you can see there that gap is edging ever so slightly bigger at the moment. Albert has managed to record a higher top speed as well, though that could well be draft assisted. So let's not read too much into that just yet. However, as you can see on the track map, we are getting closer and closer to the time where the LMDHs will be catching the GTE field, which is 14 strong today, so that's quite a lot of cars to deal with. And as Karate, Koos and Cole are all getting very close together again, but all staying in position. Ollie Cole did qualify ahead of both these drivers, but has lost out in the meantime. But they have managed to drop about half a second from the lead, so perhaps McGrath does have a bit of a pace advantage over Adam State, and has just decided to maybe use that to try and draw their pack of 3 a bit further up the field. I mean, I think if I'm Julius Braun in 7th as well, I'll be hoping desperately to catch onto the back of this pack here, although as he's car number 42, which is the lowest in split, I think 7th place is still a pretty creditable start to the race for Julius Braun. In the background, well, in the background now, and we can just see his headlights there. But yeah, I think we now seem to be falling into a little bit of a holding pattern as close as these cars are getting, and you can see the disadvantage there to being in the middle of these 3-car packs is that you've both got to be mindful of the braking zone of the car in front of you, but also the car behind you. Adam State there, I think, wanting to go a bit quicker through the apex of the last corner than he was able to. And it does look like these two aren't willing to cooperate so much, because Adam State is looking very racy here. He's slightly putting that car offline. Perhaps not to make the move, but at least just to communicate to Chris McGrath in front of him that, look, I'm not just going to sit here and cooperate unless you can go as quick as possible. And perhaps Adam State right now doesn't think they are going as quick as possible, because I mean, let's not forget, say they have 2 or 3 seconds of mandatory repairs to take in their pit stop, that's going to firstly take them out of this 3-way battle, secondly possibly land them in the one just behind them when we come through to the pit stops. But let's have a look at the GTE field now. We've got a Grodnik here in 4th with Christian Streitenberger in front of him on the final step of the podium. They are about 4 or 5 seconds behind the leaders here. So again, as you say, Michael, this might be a good time to cooperate with the other car, just because you don't want to lose touch of them, because we've seen in previous races this season, if you just stick around near the top of the field towards the end, you've not won the race until you cross the finish line. We've seen leaders have incidents in the last 10-15 minutes of races before. It could easily happen again, especially as we're going to get, in the night time here, more and more traffic towards the end of the race, because we've hit 22 minutes into the race nearly, and we're only just approaching the first traffic as we are on board with Albert now. Leo is sort of holding now. He's 2.5 seconds behind. Albert did get the fastest lap of the race last time out. And Michael, I don't know how much you drive the LMDh in particular, but certainly as a multi-class driver, if you're the fastest car approaching traffic, how would you want to approach this? So right now, I imagine you wouldn't want to be seeing the cars battling in front of you, for example.
No, I definitely would like to see them all in one straight line, leaving the excess room on the track spare for a faster car. As much as I haven't driven the LMDh, but I drive the P2 on a regular basis, finding it overtaking quite hard here in the P2 with the GTEs, especially going down into Indianapolis and then through the Porsche curves. The P2 just doesn't have that speed now, but it's tricky, Chris, and I will admit it's a tricky pace to keep up. But if you've got that drag train, which most of these P2 cars have, as long as you can get through the GTE classes without touching them or them touching you, you can still keep your position to keep fighting. But as you can see, a four-way battle ahead of the leader of the LMDh category, Chris. So the LMDh leader, Pedro Albert, coming into this, going on to the next lap. Is he going to want to get it done quick? I can guarantee he will do.
I'm sure he will, and he won't want to be catching them on the Ford chicanes, that's for sure, because I think those of you who are in the community Discord for European Sprint Series will have seen there have been quite a few incidents in the Ford chicane already this week, and we're only on Thursday. So here he is, he's going to be able to get past at least 2 of them. Let's see how he deals with the fact that there's going to be a huge disparity in pace coming through these high-speed corners. He's passed another GTE over the curbs. You can really abuse the curbs here. Again, I've seen screenshots of cars really launching themselves over those curbs. It's later on in the Mulsanne straight, as we saw Jan Curbs earlier. I mean, the most ironically named driver, if you're willing to accept that as a homophone, then of anyone to be losing the car over them. But so far, so good. Morelli has managed to get past McGrath as well. So actually, is that McGrath down 2 places on where he was the lap before? Because I'm sure McGrath had got past State earlier. And
that is indeed, Chris. He's down 2 places from his last lap.
Yeah, hopefully we can get a replay of that. If not, I'm sure we're going to see more battling between the 3 of these, and that gap does seem to be closing again between 3rd and 4th as well. Let's see if this is a replay of what happened between these 3 cars. We're just approaching the Ford chicanes here, and he's been let through, so I guess that was a slowdown for Chris McGrath, serving it before the chicanes. So I can think of one in particular American driver of this series who'll be very pleased to see that slowdown served before the chicane. But that puts Adam Staten's lead, Charlotte Morelli into 2nd, and Chris McGrath into 3rd now. But that battle is clearly far from over, and I think the same can be said for this one here. And it's another thing we've not really discussed that is something for the drivers to be mindful of, is it will be very easy to pick up those slowdowns as their tyres get worn, as their minds get tired, and as we get a little bit later into this race and they're just getting a little bit more edgy as we get closer to results time. But let's have a look at the GTE class. We've not really had a chance to look at the mid-pack of the GTE field yet, so we're with Gilles Bruxer here in car number 33. He is another driver in the middle of a battle. Mateusz Kulik behind him and Niels Kor just in front, 7th, 8th and 9th respectively. And I mean, the trouble for the GTEs now, we've already seen it with a few of them, but they're going to have the entire LMDh class coming through, and they'll be wanting this to happen on the straights just as much as the LMDHs will. We really don't want to see them into the braking zones or the low speed corners, because actually there's not a huge disparity in performance in the low speed corners. And you can see there the GT is having a bit of a fight, and an LMDH getting a bit trapped there. Can't quite see that is in the dark, but whoever it is, they've got two LMDHs just behind them, and that is going to be very unfortunate for them. I think this is Andrew McKinley and Marco Ricci. Let's see if my prediction skills are good. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that.
Well done there, Chris.
Very inconsequential skill for me to have in the bright yellow car as well. So hopefully he'll be seen by the other drivers. But I mean, that could have worked out worse for Andrew McKinley, who I think was the driver getting held up. And we can go back to Ollie Cole in the LMP2. The LMP2 class really seems to be the one happiest to stay really close together. I suppose they do have the luxury of all of this clean air on track. You can see the LMDH and GTE fields on the track map, all occupying about the same quadrant of the circuit, which leaves the other 3/4 of the racetrack for the other cars. And I think I say this every week, I'm obsessed with pit strategy, and you touched on it earlier with the undercut, Michael. But I would have thought it would have been worth one of these LMDHs coming in before they hit the GTEs, because they come out into such a big batch of clean air that they could really take advantage of the undercut, as you say. And we have got Robbie Foley coming in now. He will have already come past, I think, a couple of GTEs. We've also got Giuseppe Guarino in the pits, possibly repairing damage. He's not had a good race of it, has Guarino. So I think he's a few laps down, and perhaps not someone we need to worry about. This LMP2 battle for the lead, though, it just will not stop. Adam State currently leading it, but Michael's pick for the win, if I'm going to be so harsh as to put you on the spot there, I think Charlotte Morelli having a good solid race so far. Let's see if she is willing to take the lead from State. I think so far Morelli's been happy to take Michael's strategy pointer of just biding your time and perhaps allowing your fuel to be saved by not having to be the lead car at any point. And of course there are so many straights on this circuit that you can take advantage of the draft on. And there is, as you know, as we said before, we're only not even halfway into the race yet, so there's still plenty of time for things to go wrong.
Yeah, certainly, Chris, there is there.
And we've got a replay here, Michael, of Andrew Dawson. So this looks to be an overtake on Mulsanne with, I think, and then we'll see if that place was retaken. So that's the car number 500, Dawson, who has got past Marco Ricci, but in live timing land, they are still within half a second of each other. And it's still a fair amount, I think, of the GTE field to deal with. Actually, they're beginning to get their way through it. And actually, we've got neck and neck here between Kulik and Bruxair. This is for P8 in GTE. Kulik has got the better of Bruxair there. And I think the advantage he'll have here is that Nils Core just in front will provide a bit of a draft advantage, meaning that Bruxair wouldn't be able to sail straight on by, although he is closing as we approach Indianapolis. And we'll just see if Bruxair's going to make the move back. He's about as close as you can get a car to another car, but that line is being defended. It's forced Kulik to the outside, but that is going to become the inside as we get into it. Actually, they've got past Nils Core as well, although Core has got past. Has the 19, Nils Core managed to get that car slowed down. Kulik has now got to worry about Bruxair again, and there is an LMDH in for added benefit there. It's forced Kulik wide. Is that going to give Bruxair any sort of a run on him there? Marco Mendes in P10 is also now joining this battle. It really just shows it's the luck of the draw, really, as to when things catch you. Kulik and Bruxair, again, they are now neck and neck, same position they were in before Indianapolis, but now with Marco Mendes for company. This is Nils Core's chance to try and bridge that gap a little bit, get away from them and try and catch up Christopher Hyman in 6th. But let's see if Marco Mendes wants to make a move, because he's now got right onto the back of Bruxair, who's got so much to think about in this stage of the race. It's not a position I'd want to be. Let's see if we can have a look at what's happened to Benjamin Frigerio. He's dropped a load of places in LMDH. It may well have been a connection issue, which we've seen in the past with him. This would be a replay of him, but I think it is indeed a connection issue, which means it doesn't want to show us what's happened here, but it does look like the LMDH pit window has well and truly opened, with Jan Curbs and Yannick Seitz both having taken to the pit lane. And we'll have to keep an eye on the two of them to see if pitting a bit early will be an advantage, although I would have thought perhaps worth doing before getting through the GTE field. But there's still, so much time to go in this race. Interesting to see what's going to happen in this battle for the lead here. And let's not forget, Azcarate, Kuss and Cole are still only 4 seconds down the road from this battle. You can just see their headlights in the background here. But again, none of State, Morelli or McGrath have really looked too antsy in the car. I mean, Michael, if you were in their position, if you wanted to make the overtake, would you try and make it obvious, or would you try and spring a surprise? What would you think would work better for these drivers?
Depending on where I was with traffic, I would look at sort of trying to pit, especially within these hour races, and especially where they are. But as we can see, McGrath might be looking down for Morelli, but he's decided to back out. But me personally, I would not make it as obvious, but I would at least try and let the driver know what was going on, because the last thing I would want to do is cause an accident between the both of us. That's the last thing you want to do, cause a crash with another driver, Chris. But as we're seeing on the screen now, Marshall Hubert spinning and losing control there, but he kept that clean, didn't crash into anybody, and kept it on the track and got away straight away. But as you can see, this car's in the background catching him again.
Yeah, that's gonna, especially on the long straight, that is not the place you want to have an off. Although that is the second time we've seen an LMDH become unsettled around those Mulsanne chicanes. I wonder if they're perhaps expecting slightly more downforce than they would otherwise get. I mean, it could well be, we were at Monza last week, so it's not like there's going to be a huge disparity in terms of setups. You're still going to be running very low downforce here, I would say. But I mean, it's not often we've seen those kinds of spins in the LMP2, but Charlotte Morelli is now within a 1/10 or 2/10 of a second of Adam's State. But I think, again, not looking to make that move. But the trouble with not making that move is Chris McGrath, who was at one point about 0.8 of a second down, has halved that gap. But the LMDH leaders, Albert and Leo, have pitted. They've pitted together, which I think, especially if you're in second place there, that is the strategy to take, because you want to match what your opponent is doing, especially if you're that close together. And they've got such a big gap back to third. I mean, Marco Ricci, who was in third, has also pitted along with Andrew Dawson. So I wonder if we've actually hit a point where they don't even have another lap's worth of fuel to go, because of course, let's not forget, this is an over 3-minute lap. Although having said that, Marshall Hubert has managed to eke out an extra lap. And I mean, because of the disparity in pit strategy, that now means Hubert is up 12 positions, having started 13th. Will now get to lead a lap, which is always nice, I must say. Let's have a look at the stop times for the LMDHs. So Foley and Seitz were 22 seconds on lap 8 and 9 respectively. Jan Curbs 36 seconds. And then Albert and Leo also 22 seconds. So it does look like there's a very core time you would expect most of these LMDHs to stop for, assuming they don't have damage. So it looks like Andrew Dawson is another one that does have damage, as he is still stopped well over 30 seconds. Lockie Brown, it looks like, is going to be one of the bigger beneficiaries of that pit stop. He has come out in fourth, and one would presume will come out into third position once Hubert has pitted themselves. Andrew McKinley, I think, has had the quickest pit stop there. Robbie Foley, though, pitting 2 laps earlier, who was involved in a lap 1 off, has got himself back up into 7th. So, as you said earlier, Michael, that pitting earlier, that does seem to be the advantage. In fact, Marco Ricci and Andrew Dawson now stopped for well over a minute, so they've clearly had a big issue. But Eduardo Leo, Michael, it looks like has had an off track. So if you'd like to sort of talk us through what's happened there. Oh, that's a big shunt.
It's a big lock up there, Chris, I would say. And the fact he's hit the rear so hard, he has knocked the aligning off the rear wheel, I would say. These LMDHs are so fragile. But the fact he's got it going again, he may not have damaged it too badly. I'm not sure what these LMDHs take damage-wise at Le Mans, but I know they're very fragile on the suspension and axles, so if they hit them too hard, they are going to damage quite easily.
really made me cringe there as well, just where, of course, we've had a real-life fatality with almost exactly that crash at that corner, and I remember at the time, this was about 10 years ago now, it looked so innocuous, but again, it just shows you how easy it is to do damage to yourself and just how quick this circuit is. Mercifully, this is just a simulation, so we can afford to have our drivers take bigger risks here, which has led to some very excellent racing in the past, I must say. Perhaps also some silly racing, and we have in the LMP2 field got a difference in strategy between one of the three leaders, with Chris McGrath having pitted. He stopped for 22.67 seconds, which of the three LMP2s that have stopped so far is by some distance the quickest stop. So let's see how that will affect things when Adam State and Charlotte Morelli come into pit. We presume on the next lap. They've still probably got about 2 minutes to go on their lap before they reach the pit stop. But let's not forget what's happening on screen as well. We're with Christopher Hyman at the moment now. He's in P6 for the GTEs. Nobody in the GTE field is yet to pit. Konrad Dokudovic, apologies to Konrad if I have butchered that, in this sister Corvette. Just alongside, I think perhaps Hyman was looking for the move there, but LMDH in the way and not able to do that. So let's have a look at the LMP2 leaders. They've actually managed to build a bit of a gap back to Max Kuss and Ollie Cole, and as Karate did pit and was nearly 2 seconds of a lap slower than the other pitters in LMP2, or at least Chris McGrath. So I don't think we'll be seeing as Karate challenging for that podium position that we speculated someone may do, but I think we want to see what happens between State and Morelli here, and also just to update us on the pit stops in LMDH. We did have, or did we have, the LMDH? Who was it that was a lap later in the LMDHs? Because they seem to have disappeared. Or was it Lockie Brown, who is up to second? I mean, up 12 places on merit now, it seems. That's pretty good going. Goodness me, apologies to Lockie Brown then for thinking that was just a pit strategy out of sync. But no, 12 places gained is...
I think, Chris, I think, sorry for interrupting there, you were thinking of Marshall Hubert. He's now down 3 places in category and down to 16th overall. He's now behind Max Kuss in the LMP2.
Oh, I wonder what happened there then. That may well have been an accident or something. I mean, they're not going as it stands. In fact, Chris McGrath, who we're with now, is in theory has just gone past Hubert, but I can't see a car off track in the background anywhere, and that's a real shame for Hubert. Maybe they ran out of fuel. That could well have been what happened there. And yeah, let's see what happens with Chris McGrath. I mean, Charlotte Morelli and Adam State are just approaching the Ford chicanes now. We're presuming both of them are going to come into the pits at the same time. In fact, yes, they are. Morelli in front of State, so I think Morelli did that on this lap as well. And we can have a look at the Hubert crash now, see what happened to Martial in the car number 8 LMDH. And oh, that is someone pushing a little bit too hard, and I can't. Unfortunately, it's dark, so it's a bit tricky to tell exactly where on the circuit they are. I think that may well have been at Mulsanne. Surprised that that's led to Hubert stopping. But let's go to Chris McGrath. Chris McGrath will be just coming up to the Ford chicanes now, having just come through the Porsche curves. State and Morelli are still stopped now, so will this have been a huge advantage for Chris McGrath?
Well, Morelli's out, Chris. She did a 20.52 in the pit stop in the stall itself, so she's now down on the way down that pit exit, but she's might not get out in front of Mr. McGrath.
Oh, I think actually it looks like it's going to be really comfortable, and let's see Adam State as well coming out. So Chris McGrath, Adam State have come out neck and neck, but Charlotte Morelli's fuel saving earlier in the race was absolutely sublime. So it not just saved 2 seconds in the pit lane, but managed to save nearly 4 seconds in total. So somehow taking the actual pit lane itself 2 seconds quicker than Chris McGrath did, and 4 seconds quicker, or rather 6 seconds quicker in total than Adam State managed. So I think your early race hyping up of Charlotte Morelli were completely warranted, as it turns out. That was incredible first stint from Charlotte Morelli, and now we've only got 20 minutes to go. That's probably looking at 6 laps or so from here. It's really not that much now. So Chris McGrath and Adam State are going to either have to work very well together or just accept that they're now second and third, and we can have a really big battle. I mean, they were nearly side by side coming through one of the Mulsanne chicanes just now, I think. But let's not forget that GT is still having a battle. In fact, we've got Kolosierz and Rack side by side. This is for the this is for second and third, but Tobias Ogrodnik in the lead has managed to get an extra lap out of his car, although we are presuming he can do the last minute or so. And actually, Kolosierz has gone wide under pressure there. That's allowed Michael Rack through, and not just through, but and you can see the flash of the lights there. He's not happy with him there. I mean, I didn't see any contact there, Michael. I don't know about you, but that's just a driver, I think, succumbing to the pressure. And it's in a way, I think, reassuring to see even the top drivers can crumble under pressure sometimes.
Yeah, certainly. I didn't see any contact going into that corner then at Arnage, but as you can see, they could have crumbled under the pressure. It's easily done. One thing I did notice while we were seeing that battle was Eduardo Leo still in the pits. He's been in there now 3 minutes and 25 seconds.
Yeah, I think he's just had to go and repair the damage on his outlap. I mean, they probably wouldn't have taken tyres, because I don't believe the tyres go so much in this hour-long race. But, I mean, the difference in weight because of the fuel tank, maybe that just caught him out, and it's easy to make a mistake on your outlap. But look how close McGrath and State are now. This is even closer than they were in the first half of the race, and no need to fuel save now so much. So we'll see just how willing Adam State is to stay behind Chris McGrath. I think at this point they can accept that they're not going to be able to close a 5-second gap to Charlotte Morelli without a mistake from our current LMP2 leader. But we're seeing, for the most part, everything is beginning to spread out elsewhere in the field, although as you can see, the LMP2s are going to start catching the GTEs, and the GTEs have pitted. So there's going to be no respite for them, and that could well shake up things in both the LMP2 and the GTE fields. And there are a few hypercars sprinkled in there as well, but the leaders I don't think are going to have to worry quite so much about traffic now. Well, actually, say that Pedro Albert definitely will. And yeah, you see Jan Curbs going over some more curbs there, and Andrew Dawson's managed to get ahead of him. And yeah, it's just Curbs, I don't think, taking to this car quite as well as he did in the LMP1. Apologies, I'm listening to Driver Chat in race, and I think Matthew Trivett in the LMP2 is having a bit of fun by the sounds of it. And I probably should mute that because there's only so many audio streams you can listen to at any given time for an hour-long race. But we're just about to hit the 3-quarter mark of this race. And for the first time, really, it looks like most of the drivers have managed to spread out. Of course, we've still got this battle in front of us, Jan Curbs, Andrew Dawson. Of course, the battle for P2 and LMP2, and then there looks to be quite a battle developing in GTE for, I think, P6 with an LMDh for company. You can see Frigerio on his recovery drive coming through there. But we've got Marco Mendes, Nils Kor and Gilles Bruxair. Bruxair, of course, we saw earlier in that big fight with Matthias Kulik, who is now 10 seconds down on that battle. But there's not actually been a huge amount of movement in the GTE field. A few drivers making 1 or 2 places, but it's only really Christian Streitenberger down 7 in 11th from 4th, who, by the looks of it, had to repair damage in the pits. The only driver to have had a huge change in positions. Although Nils Kor, who we're on with now and who's having to defend from Gilles Bruxair, has jumped Gilles Bruxair in the course of this race. But of course, as we mentioned earlier, Kor is going to have Marco Mendes' draft to help him defend from Bruxair. But we saw Bruxair quite confident coming through into Indianapolis, which is where we are heading now. And of the 3, he is the closest to making a move. He is edging ever so slightly closer to the back of Nils Kor's Porsche, but perhaps not close enough to make a move. Are we going to see him make a late dive on the inside or outside here? Doesn't look like we're going to see it happen just yet. In fact, Nils Kor looks very confident under braking into Indianapolis and is now caught right up to the back of Marco Mendes, putting him under pressure. But unfortunately for them, they have got an LMD H for company. They do. Can't quite see who that is. Certainly not our leader. You can see on the track map there, just coming up to the right-hander at the end of Mulsanne. And that's this LMDH getting through nice and safely on a straight, much to the relief of all three of these GTEs. But I think, Michael, with just under 15 minutes to go, do you think we're going to see any drivers miscalculate their fuel? Because this is, as we've mentioned, quite a long lap. How would you have approached this? Do you overfuel just to stay safe, or do you think it's worth taking the risk and just seeing how it goes?
I personally will always take at least an extra litre and a half of fuel. If I don't use it, then so be it. I've not lost anything. However, that one time I don't do that 1.5 litres, I will fall short and end up having to go all the way to the pits with a tow. So I don't think we're going to see these top drivers doing anything daft when it comes to fuel strategy. I think there'll be plenty of fuel in those tanks to get them to the end. And as we can see, McGrath overtaking Adam State there for P2. And they've brought that gap down now for just over 4.5 seconds to Charlotte Morelli. So if it stays that way, this will be our top 3 in the LMP2 category.
Yeah, they've done well to bridge that gap, but I think they're going to run out of time unless they can put enough pressure on Morelli that she makes a mistake. And you can see there, Adam State having to take quite an aggressive overtake on a GTE through the 4 chicanes, but of course he is in a battle, so it's not as though he's going to just concede that. Although it does look like the GTE that he did that to, which I suspect was Tobias Detlef, because he's got Christian Streitenberger just behind him as well. So as much as these classes are equal in terms of how much they're allowed to deal with the traffic, although blue flags are going to be shown for the slower class, they are always going to have a little bit more of a victim situation if you're in the slower class, and that's why they're always going to hope that these faster cars come up to them on the straights. And this battle for P2 between the number 10 of Chris McGrath and number 14 of Adam State continues. They're getting past a slightly crumpled looking GTE, and again McGrath, closest you can get. They've got their MP2 for company now as well, so McGrath perhaps grateful for that, because it perhaps puts State off from making that move. Are they going to be lucky and get past that LMP2 before they get to the next Mulsanne chicane? I mean, again, you can really see how close these two classes are for top speed, because they still haven't managed to get past. It's very much in the corners with the difference in downforce that they'll see that. And Adam State has just managed to get past as well, but that was very touch and go for the two of them. And I suspect we'll see that issue raise its head again before this race is done. Although, let's just see how many other GTEs or LMP. We've not actually got many more LMP2s for the LMDHs to come past, so perhaps and actually you can see a bump draft there from Adam State. I think as much saying, I'm not looking to make this move anytime soon, although surely at some point he will do, because they've got quite a bit of clean air coming up ahead of them. And I just think perhaps that's a case of, do you reckon, Michael, do you reckon he's going to wait for the last lap, or is that putting too much pressure on that last lap, or do you think we'll see a move in a second now?
I may say second to last, but they're bump drafting. Adam State's eager for the second place spot. It'd be daft for them both to do something quite stupid this so late on now. But Adam State wants that second place back from Chris McGrath, so he will take it, but when, only time will tell.
Yeah, we've still got at least a few laps to go before we get right into the deep end of this race, as the clock just hits 10 minutes. And let's not forget that the way that this works in this series is when that clock hits 0, it's the next time the leader of the LMDH class crosses the start-finish line. So if they've only just done that, we're going to see basically effectively an extra lap. They've got another 3 minutes to do. So that may well, if it's unfortunate for someone, that may lead to someone losing out from their fuel strategy. But with where we are at the moment, with 9.5 minutes to go, and Albert coming up to the end of lap 15 or lap 14, 15 laps, it'll probably be 3 more from now. I think there would have to be some lap records set for it to be anything else. But we did see that earlier in the season where it was touch and go as to whether or not we get an extra lap. But Jan Kurbs just so far defending well from Andrew Dawson, but let's have a look at what happened to Christian Streitenberger, who was in a fight, and it looks like he's just tagged the wall a bit there. Oh, and that was the number 36 of Matthias Kulik, and they've collected another GT as well. The 32 got through okay. That was Kevin Ciclari. So this is what happened to Matthias Kulik. That was the damaged Porsche we saw earlier. Oh, dearie me, that's not the rejoin we want to see from supposedly elite level racers. Especially when you're, oh goodness me, this is not ideal, I think is the euphemistic way I'll put that.
That's terrible, Chris. He should not have done the re-entries he did there. What he should have done was just total to the pits. He spun out so bad in the Porsche curves, and then this obviously caused a bit of a cluster with the other drivers. It's a shame to have seen that.
Yeah, it's a frustrating thing as well, because these drivers would have put, well, hopefully put hours of practice into these cars. They've just done 52 minutes of really quite intense racing, only for someone else deciding to reverse back onto the track to ruin it for them through no fault of their own. So it's frustrating to see. All he needed to do was have his relative open, hold the brakes and wait for a 4 or 5 second gap, maybe a bit longer, depending on how quickly he could have got sorted out. But it's a real shame to see 2 or 3 other GTE cars have their races ended. I guess if we're going to look at this from a competitive standpoint, at least it wasn't any leaders in any of our 3 fields, because that would have been a real hammer blow. But you know, it's really not what we want to see, and I'm sure most of us would have done something stupid at some point, because adrenaline and frustration leads us to do some stupid things, but we don't want to see that. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, we've had some very solid racing here from Chris McGrath and Adam State, who I don't think have been more than a second apart from each other at all in the last 50 minutes. They're very attached to each other, except of course for the fact they took alternate pit strategies. But I mean, the fact that there's a whole 0.3 of a second apart, this is a big gap by their standards recently as we come up to Indianapolis. Adam State quite a bit further away than he was on the previous lap, but what that may well mean is he's able to take a better line through the corner, and probably not because it's not an overtaking point, but it does at least mean he can stay a little bit closer as we come through into the Porsche curves and just put a bit more pressure on McGrath, both in terms of their own races, the 2 of them, but also a bit of pressure on, it's going to force Chris McGrath to make some decisions with traffic that maybe he wouldn't want to do, because he knows if he doesn't, Adam State is, pardon me, right there to sweep up the pieces, and I guess they'll be grateful there's not a GTE reversing onto track for them there. Are they going to be able to get past this GTE nice and safely? The extra downforce helping a lot as they, well, as Chris McGrath managed to sweep round the outside. Adam State less able to do so, but he is going to get past here, but it has allowed an LMDh to get through. That's actually Albert, our leader, coming through to start lap number 16. And I mean, he has got a more than 30-second lead over Lockie Brown, so I think he can afford to take sensible decisions at this stage, whereas Chris McGrath, Adam State, perhaps less so. The other good news for probably Charlotte Morelli as well, but certainly for Chris McGrath, Adam State, is where they're going to be not that far behind Pedro Albert on the final lap. They're not going to end up doing effectively an extra lap over the rest of the LMP2 field. So their race will be over about as soon as it can be, which is good news, in particular I think for Charlotte Morelli right now. But actually I think here you can see Adam State seems to have a lot more speed through the early stage of this lap, but if anything I think he was almost too close as we came onto Marsan, because he's not actually been able to close that gap, and he is rapidly running out of time to make that move. We are probably on our penultimate lap now, and Michael, if you could put yourself in Adam State's shoes, where would you look to line this move up around this track? Is there a particular point you'd think would be best, or is it more a case of play it by ear, see if you can force a mistake?
Well, that's a good question, Chris. It would all be a case of whereabouts on the track you are, traffic. But I personally would like to try and see them do a decent, safe overtake. Me personally, I would either overtake on the Musalon or on the back straight going into Indianapolis. But I would like to see Adam State get in front of Chris McGrath this lap. They've lost the lead to Charlotte Morelli. That's just under 7 seconds now. We saw Chris McGrath getting loose on the exit of one of the turns, going into turn 2 and 3, just onto the Mousselon, with the LMDh overtaking him. That allowed Adam State to close up really close, but as you can see, and as you've said throughout the race, he's just not wanting to put his foot down that too much and go for the overtake.
Well, my pet theory that I'm working on is that Adam State reckons he's got a higher downforce setup on, so that he knows if he makes that move and there's going to be a long straight afterwards, that Chris McGrath is just going to sail straight back past him. I mean, the other thing that we perhaps need to consider is that both of these drivers are elite iRacers, and they just happen to be very evenly matched on speed. But Adam State very happy to bump draft at the moment. This is about the 4th or 5th time we've seen him do it. I think Chris McGrath will be quite grateful that he's at least dropping off before we hit the corner before Indianapolis, because you do not want to be bump drafting and turning the car side. You can see he's gone for a cheeky little half move there, has Adam State, but I think that may have been more to put Chris McGrath off than anything. But to be honest, if you can manage with a 5k iRacing LMP2 driver behind you for 55 minutes, I don't think that is going to put you off necessarily. Maybe there's also an element of just wanting to consolidate the positions they're in, because Ollie Cole is only 7 seconds down the road. If these two were to have an accident, it would promote Ollie Cole up almost certainly, as Albert has just about to start his white flag lap. Charlotte Morelli as well. In fact, they've just gone past each other. You can see we're on board with Albert there. And actually, Michael Rack in the GTE lead is not too far up the road either. So it's not. I quite like when this happens. All three leaders going to be occupying nearly the same space on the track, and you can see Rack now has pulled out a 7-second lead. I'm pretty sure that's the biggest the lead in the GTE field has been all race. So a very solid last half of the race for Rack in the Corvette. And of course, don't forget we run a championship especially for this broadcast split, and 2nd and 3rd in GTE are our leaders of that championship. So Tobias Ogrodnik, who we're with now, and that's car 7, that's Charlotte Morelli just behind. So ooh, you can see, I think perhaps a more aggressive pullout than you'd want to see there from Morelli, especially considering she is defending the lead of the race. But no harm, no foul, they've got through. And actually the gap between McGrath and State has increased. There's now a second between them. So has Adam State left it too late to make that move? They are on to the Mulsanne straight, I think. And actually we can have a look. This is the closest battle on the track now. This is Ritchie and Dawson for 7th and 8th in LMDh. Dawson up 4 places from the start, Ritchie down 2. So you'd assume Ritchie has more pace, but at the moment it's Dawson that seems to be challenging him here, and he's going to have a long old straight to do it on. And unfortunately, as you can see on track map, they are going to have probably a bit of traffic to also contend with. Adam State's dropped even further off Chris McGrath, so that's now a 2nd and a quarter. That will take State out of draft range, so I wonder if maybe Adam State either made a mistake somewhere. He was half a second slower on the last lap. It was the fastest lap of the race for all of the top 3. But we'll go back to Ogrodnik because he is side by side with Kolosiev now. Ogrodnik is on the inside here as we come into the final part of Mulsanne. Are they going to behave under braking? You can see both cars twitching ever so slightly, but Ogrodnik with the inside. And now an LMP2 to come past as well. So we've got Ogrodnik and Kolosiev still alongside. This is, of course, the last lap of the race. And this is for position. This is for P2. That is Chris McGrath coming past. That is Adam State just behind them. Adam State will be so frustrated because I think this is... Well, no, he's not accepting that the race is over. He's got past, although I think those GTs will be just as happy with that as well. Kolosiev has ended up with the position over Ogrodnik. So just a little bit stronger on the straight line speed there. And I don't think there's really too many other places that a GTE could make the move without forcing the mistake. So we'll go to Albert because he is about to come across the line. Well, I say he's still got the Porsche curves and the Ford chicane to contend with, but it would take a severe brain fart to mess it up at this stage. And this has been a pretty supreme drive from Albert, hasn't it, Michael? He's not really put a foot wrong, especially once Eduardo Leo was out of the race. This is, I mean, a 30-second gap. Any racing driver would love to have that kind of lead, wouldn't they?
Yeah, correct. And well done to Pedro Albert for the race. He's done well, stayed safe, not caused any issues, not had any issues, and took P1. And well, I would say the person I shouted out at the beginning of the race for the winner in the P2 category, Charlotte Morelli, and then topping it off, Michael Rack in the Corvette for the GTE category. And still, as we can see, Tobias Ogrodnik still fighting hard to the line, and he's obviously not gonna. He's gonna stay in third, but a bit of a cheeky switchback just there. Everyone likes to fight to the end, as you can see. Michael Ricky and Andrew Dawson still. Hopefully, Dawson trying to get it to the end, but I think he's gonna have to just settle for eighth there, Chris, at the end.
Yeah, I think Richie has done quite well to keep that position with the amount of straights to defend on. But I think that was a relatively clean race, all things considered. We had the one stupid incident with the GTEs and then a few first lap incidents. But aside from that, pretty well done. And actually, Dawson got very close in the end. I think we kind of assumed that battle was over, but it was only 12 thousandths or 12 hundredths of a second rather between the two of them on the line. But Richie managing to hold him off, and we are going to have a long old wait. I think most people are. I think we got P13 in the LMDH. Giuseppe Garino, bless him, still going round, but we've not got anyone in the first half of the circuit, so perhaps not as long as we were maybe expecting to have to wait for the results to come in. Michael, I mean, I'm going to get you to put you on the spot. Would you like to pick a driver of the day, or just someone who's really taking your eye? I'll let you pick Charlotte Morelli if you want, but if you've got anyone else you're going to shout out as well. Uh,
um, would you want me to pick a driver per category or just an overall driver of the day?
or if you've got a driver per category, I'll gladly take your input for all three.
Okie dokie. We'll start with the GTE. I would say the driver of the day, in my eyes, would be Tobias Ogrodnik. Going into the LMP2 category would be Adam State. Unfortunately, it was sad to see him finish third. The battle in the three of those had in that category throughout this race was fantastic. And driver of the day from the LMDH is Loki Brown, up 12 places from the start of the race. Fantastic driving.
Yeah, I don't think we made a big enough song and dance about that, actually. 12 places in that LMDH field, and that is a very competitive LMDH field. That's also going to net Lockie a cool 84 iRating, which is nothing to sniff at in a series this strong. That's also going to be, in terms of the iRating points, with the strength of field. I mean, you can see in the bottom right, 5.1k. That is one of the biggest softs I've ever seen. So that's going to be a lot of points for the iRacing, excuse me, standings. And we can have a replay here. It's not going to show me what the replay is. Here we are. Slow-mo, I think, of Albert. Excuse me. And actually, we can get the race results up now. So Pedro Albert, our race winner, 30 seconds clear of Lockie Brown, who, as we said, was up 12 places. And then Dennis Wolf, who himself was up 3, takes third. Robbie Foley in fourth, Andrew McKinley in fifth, and George Brabner in sixth. All managed to stay within a minute of the leader. Marco Ricci, Andrew Dawson, Jan Curbs, and Yannick Seitz all stayed on the lead lap, with Frigerio, Leo Guarino still running but laps down, and Hubert, Svelasi, and Gomez all unable to finish. Looking at the LMP2, the aforementioned Charlotte Morelli has won here and was 6 seconds clear in the end of Chris McGrath and 7 seconds clear of Adam State in the end, after the three of them for the first 40 minutes were neck and neck. Ollie Cole ended up getting the better of Adrian Azcarate in fourth and fifth, but as you can see, they were just 7/10 separating them. In the end, Max Koos had to repair some damage, so unfortunately dropped off and finished sixth. Elliot Hellier in seventh, Jose Rodriguez in eighth, and Matthew Trivett in ninth. The only drivers left on the lead lap, with Juan Martin 2 laps down and Julius Braun and Tanguy Bion unable to finish. And then having a look at GTE, Michal Rak ending up winning, 10 seconds clear of Kolosiec and Ogrodnik, who lead out the podium. Konrad Dokudowiec in fourth, and then Christopher Hyman in fifth. ended up within a second of each other nearly as well. Marco Mendes got the better of Nils Kor in 6th and 7th, with Gilles Bruxaire a fair sight off in 8th. Orlando Talhero, I don't think we have mentioned once this race, so that's a very quiet but very nicely finished 9th position for them. Tobias Detlef in 10th and Kevin Seclari in 11th, all finishing on the lead lap with Kulik, Patiglio and Streitenberger. I think all three of them were involved in that incident we saw, and they all retired 2 or 3 laps down. And we can have a look at the championship standings for the broadcast split. Moreno Sirica not here tonight, but still in the lead. But you can see now Spets, Panicia and Wolf and Albert all on 25 points. So all to play for there. Kevin Crosney, Arthur LeHook, Christian Bow, Lockie Brown and Patrick Svillassi rounding out our top 10 there. LMP2, Charlotte Morelli has now got a pretty handy looking lead there. 50 points. Max Kuss, 21 points behind on 29 with Kaz Brinkhuisen and Claudio Visparelli on 25 in joint third. Angel Guevara in fifth with Christian Walter, Kieran Smart, Chris McGrath, Adam State and Just Baumeister rounding out the top 10. And finally, the GTE field. We've got, and we saw it on track today. We're seeing it in the standings as well. Tobias Ogrodnik, Søren Kolosiec, almost neck and neck, just 3 points separating them 4 races in. Leonardo Nastasi in third with Michael Rack picking up all 25 points today, launching himself up to fourth. Marco Mendes fifth, and then Alessandro Patiglio sixth, Scorsad seventh, Gross eighth, Soldatov ninth, and Andreas Linda in 10th. But with 8 weeks still to go, there is all to play for. And as we mentioned earlier in the race, in the YouTube description of this broadcast is a link to join us on Discord where you can discuss this race and any amazing overtakes or incidents that you've had. Michael, thank you for joining us this evening. And of course, we've had Sean Cranley Swash in the production booth as well. I've been Chris Rowlands. We will see you next week at Daytona, where I think we should expect to see another strong, well-populated split because, of course, we've got the 24-hour race as well. So thank you all for joining us, and we shall see you next week.
Well, good evening.